So being in the esports space, I find myself kind of very insular. So the first 5 episodes of this show, which is a show but not a show, I don't really know what it is. It's just a series at this point. It tends to just be people from the esports space, and I've tried to kind of expand my written coverage out into the creator economy at large. And I've been a business journalist for like 3 years now, and I don't even know how I found your Twitter account actually. Thinking about it now, I'm not sure how I came across yourself, but I saw some kind of parallels with what I was interested in like the esports side of stuff, and I guess gaming more broadly, with what you're helping athletes to do, and what you're pushing for every single day. So I thought, oh, why not shoot my shot, as was discussing just before this, and just tweet out, and you were one of the people I tagged as to who I would like to record with. And here we are. So obviously that worked. So that's lesson number 1 for people watching.
Shoot your shot.
The worst that can happen is you get ignored. And I mean, you don't have to do it publicly as well. So if you get embarrassed easily, then that's what it is. So yeah, I just want to say thank you for taking the time. As I say, like we've not really spoken too much prior, and there's not a lot of cross section in terms of you're not in esports as such, and I'm not in sports unless you count esports as a sport, but that's a podcast for another day. That's an entirely different topic.
Different discussion.
Yeah, for sure. And so I am just genuinely trying to think how I came across you, but that just means you're doing a good job building like your personal brand, right? And like and spreading your word and your message and mission on Twitter. And I guess the first step would be just a very quick rundown of like what you are doing and what you're hoping to do, just for anyone who's uninitiated, because this is my audience is very much esports, so best to do that.
If I had to describe what I do, I feel like my whole thing, or something I've learned, is that I'm always energized when I'm working at a point of passion. And I feel like since my career began, whenever you want to define when a career journey begins, I found it's been 2 things: marketing and storytelling and building brands on one side, and then staying close to sports. So I grew up playing basketball. I played at Harvard. Was an amazing experience. And when I was in undergrad, I started to kind of test and learn. I did not know what I wanted to study. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I ended up doing sociology, and I remember being like insecure about it almost, because I was like, oh, I'm not gonna be able to like land a competitive job and out of undergrad, like what am I gonna do with sociology? And it actually taught me so much, and it like shed a light on why I love marketing, because I love learning about people. I love learning about communities, what makes people tick, what brings people together. And I love telling stories. I may not be the best writer, right? But I love like the big vision and how sharing something, communicating something bigger than yourself can bring people together. I just always found that fascinating. And so that was an undergrad, and like tried some marketing internships at like the Patriots. That was my very first one. And then at Under Armour too. And both of those taught me different things about marketing, different aspects of marketing. One was customer marketing strategy. It was very analytical. One was, I think it was just like broader, like brand strategy. This is like 12 weeks. So I wasn't like, it was an internship, but you get to learn a little bit, you know? So I kind of took both of those things, and I was like, I know I want to be in sports long-term. That has always been my passion. It what energizes me, but I also really love marketing. And I, feel like it's the craft that I want to get better at. If I draw the parallel to basketball, which you'll hear me do a lot in this interview, it's like the craft that I want to get better at, and I want to be, known for and perfect and work at and things like that. So that's why I started at PepsiCo in New York. I was there for a couple of years. I worked in strategy innovation, and I also worked in our NBA partnership. And 2 amazing years. I just absolutely loved my experience there and learned so much, just about the basics of brand management. And simultaneously, when I first graduated, coming out of the women's basketball program, it was also this other journey of like self-realization for how I develop myself, right? I think student athletes, you hear so much about athletes in business and all the things that we learn help us win in business. That's true, but it's often just through the lens of what makes you a great employee, right? It's like, you're hardworking, you're a great collaborator, you're great at teamwork, your work ethic, all these things, so important. Like, yes, do the job. Like those things help me every single day and they get me fired up every day. But there's also this other huge part of your career, which is developing yourself and how you manage yourself and set a vision for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the part that I struggled with as a recently graduated student athlete. And it actually sparked me down this whole journey of starting a podcast called Court to Corporate, which is exactly what you think it's about. It's about highlighting student athletes in business, but with a real focus on that 98% of us that don't go on to play professionally. How do we leverage what we know from our game to succeed in our careers? That was really the goal.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just been a journey, you know, like growing that, you know, growing at Pepsi. And then in July of last year, I joined Will Ventures. We're an early stage VC. We're investing through this lens that sports are a proving ground for innovation beyond the category. And we look at that in two ways: health and wellness, and also media and content and consumer across both verticals. Mm-hmm. So in my role there, I'm leading marketing, and it's been a great ride. I'm loving, you know, just getting into venture and learning from the team. It's been such an amazing experience so far. So that was a mouthful. I'll pause there because we could take this conversation a bunch of different directions, but that's kind of, you know, just, you know, finding the intersection of the things that energize me and, you know, working to get better at them is what keeps me going.
And I'm going to latch on to kind of like what drives you a bit. And from what I can tell, it's like empowering athletes on both sides of the game, right? So it's like, it's sometimes easy to get kind of lost in what you're doing. And if you've got one goal and that's to become a professional athlete, then you may leave other things on the table, right? And maybe not set yourself up best. And whether you do make it or not, like there is an after sport, there is like an after the game, right? What comes there? And bringing it back to esports a little bit, just quickly, like we do see that quite a lot now. And while careers don't tend to last as long as they do in traditional sports, especially say a basketball or like English football in soccer, they retire at say like 32, but they've been playing since they were maybe like 3 or 4 years old. But in esports, I'd say like 24, 25 is like the age where a lot of players end up retiring, and they'll go one of two ways. They'll either go into coaching, where they're probably not even the best coach. It's just they have some in-game knowledge, and suddenly everyone thinks, okay, they must be able to translate that. But obviously there's a lot more that goes into it. Or they go into content creation. So they just back off, go onto Twitch, utilize whatever brand they've kind of built along the way, probably subconsciously, not even actually putting any effort into that. And then try and make money that way. So it's almost like Twitch is like a retirement plan. Content creation is like a retirement plan for them, but they haven't been building their brand along the way. And we're seeing a little bit more now where they'll get a logo made and they'll have maybe cohesion across their social media graphics, but that doesn't mean they've got a brand all of a sudden, you know? And if they if it's like an off season or something, they'll maybe stream once or twice a week just to keep themselves busy. But it seems like on both sides of the equation, it's an afterthought as opposed to something that they're doing during the process. And so do you think it should be like the athletes themselves that are responsible for building their own brand? Because at the end of the day, it's there to benefit them, or is a team needed so they can have their mind on the game and their development there? While someone, say yourself, if you were attached to an athlete or working with an athlete in trying to grow their personal brand and make sure they're kind of fine-tuned, ready for whatever's next. So would you do that so they could just concentrate on what they're doing and not put them off their game and maximize their kind of potential and their peak performance there? I think it is a weird kind of, maybe a untested kind of approach to it that way. And I'm not sure what's best. I don't know if anyone really knows, but.
No, that's really interesting. I feel like, well, within that, or I actually want to start to answer is like, a logo is not a personal brand.
Yes.
Right? Like that's marketing 101. That's also personal branding 101. And I think that also extends to a lot of different ways that we think about building a personal brand. Because I think, and what I did at first was like, I got really attached to the medium, right? Like when I first started, I did the work to like dig deep, find out what my story would be, and then acted on it and like put it out into the universe, manifested it, grew it, shared it with a bunch of people, share it with a lot of people today. But I did feel that over time I got really attached to the medium, and that being the name Court to Corporate, right? Like the medium being the podcast or the Instagram page. When in reality, none of those things were my brand, right? Like Kirby Porter, right? And I think it's really important as more and more people get into creating content in a way. From my perspective, it was from a career standpoint. I'm not trying to like be famous, right? It's, I see this as a medium to share my narrative and my career and build my profile in my career. But along the way, it's important to know that each step is a part of your story. So allow yourself to evolve and not think that one step in the road or the first thing that you do is the end all be all and that you have to stay within that lane. Like allow yourself to grow, right? Like, because it's not, at any point in time, it's not about the name that you create for the page you're creating content or the logo that you have for yourself. It's all about your story. And like, for example, with myself, I started with Court to Corporate, and for a long time I was like, it has to be this, it has to be this. Like, I have to make the podcast, I have to make the content. And then over time, I realized I'm putting a lot of pressure on myself for no reason. This is all just a part of my story. I should allow it to evolve and let it come to life in whatever way I want to. And it actually led to a period of time where I actually wasn't, producing podcasts when I'd been doing it for a year. And it was really hard because I feel like we live in a culture that makes us all feel like we have to be on all the time in order to be like building our brand and making an impact, when I don't believe that's true at all. Like, I believe there's power in like doing the work too, right? And like having results speak. But at the same time, like taking that break and stepping away and not creating content for a long time helped me come back like 10 times stronger. Like, I was able to see the full view of like, what did building Court to Corporate actually teach me? It taught me like different phases of building my career, of building my brand, and key messages that I'm able to package up and share with people now, right? So I think that's even more powerful. But to answer your question, in terms of like, is this something that athletes or esport creators should be doing themselves? Something I always talk about is that like all student athletes have the ability to do both. And, like if you think about your playing career, your entire journey, right? From whenever you started playing to reaching your highest level of play, you're geared to do both. You're excelling on the court or whatever field of play you play on. I play basketball. So you're excelling on the court and you're excelling in the classroom, or you're putting your all in the classroom too. And both of those things evolve, right? Over time, they go hand in hand. One can't live without the other. And I think it was really interesting when you talked about like, what do, in your world, what they go on to do like after. I think it's the same thing for student athletes too. Like, we either go on to begin working, or a lot of us leverage the platforms that we had while we were playing to create content and further it, even more. But I don't think, creating content or building your brand distracts you from anything at any point in your journey, whether you're playing or whether you're in your career. It's kind of all a part of investing in yourself. That's how I see it. I think it's a part of the journey. You're geared, you're designed, you're built to do both. You're built to be multifaceted. And I think so many people should really, really embrace that as a strength versus trying to suppress it and make yourself small for the environment you're in, when it's really your superpower, right? As a student athlete. So that's kind of my view of like, there should be support, there should be systems, there should be tools in place. There's so many tools today that enable us to do this, but at the same time, like, trust yourself. Like, you have it within you to do that, whether you're playing or whether you're on to your career.
For sure. And I think like working on your, whether it's personal persona, personal brand, whatever it may be, while you are trying to make it, can be a really beneficial thing itself, right? Like, because there are people who are big personalities, and that works into the whole marketing side of the equation. So maybe a team would be interested in you partly because you have this great personality as well that'll work well with the media, and it'll work well on social media, and kind of supplementary content around it. And if you have if you and another person are playing on a very similar level, and a team is looking at both of you, if you have something else that adds to your stock as such, like, that can only help. So I'm trying to, not forcefully but gently, educate some of the people around me on that. And obviously that extends to absolutely anything. If there's two people going for a job interview, if you have 100,000 followers on Twitter and a very engaged audience as well, and you're sharing your learnings publicly and such, like, chances are that'll probably be more appealing, as long as you're not like some complete alt-right, you know what I mean, like some absolute knobhead. As long as you're not being dangerous or egregious with anything, you know, as long as it's relevant to what you are and what you do, then I think it is beneficial. And we're seeing like agents trying to step in and do stuff now where we are, but I think it's a big money play on their behalf, and it's not really in the best interests of the people they're representing. And how I battle that, I don't know. And one thing you touched on there is as well, I think, like, not being afraid to like pivot or like change a little bit. You said like being afraid of like the next step or whatever. Like, I think because we see ourselves as like the main character in the movie we're living out, we see ourselves as really important, and therefore everyone is watching what we do.
Nobody cares that much.
Nobody gives a shit.
Nobody gives.
No, I stopped myself from covering things other than esports because I was like, well, I'm like the esports business journalist guy. Like, I can't go into like gaming or look at how YouTubers are making money, or look at fucking Dogecoin, which is going mental at the moment. No. Like, I can't do any of that. And it's like, no, so I actually stopped myself for like 6 months.
Nobody told you that.
Nobody, me. Exactly. And then I did it, and then a couple people made jokes, but they're good friends, and it's like, that's what it is. I'd make jokes about them as well. But apart from that, it's just, I'm adding to my arsenal of knowledge now, and also the things that are available to me, and the knowledge that I have is far superior to what it was there before. And it doesn't mean I was actually abandoning what I've been doing prior anyway. It's adding on. Yeah, it's just, I think because everything's so public, you kind of assume like, oh no, loads of people are going to judge me. And it's like, oh, people don't really care. And also like attention spans and memory are both thing, right? On social media, everyone's doing their own shit. So I don't think that's really a good reason, or like a strong narrative to tell yourself as to why you can't do something at all by any means. And
so real. Well, one thing on that is like, I feel like I've learned that lesson in so many ways, and it's something I still have to get better at, because it's like I'll overcome one barrier and then like I'll find a new way to like, you know, not really step into, you know, all that I'm doing. Because for example, like with Court to Corporate, when I first started it, it was low-key like a burner account. Like, I wasn't sharing it with anyone. I was just creating content from it. People didn't know it was me. There was no name behind it. I introduced myself as like, I'm starting Court to Corporate once, but like I never treated it as like a personal blog. I never really promoted it. Like, you know, it was something that I was like, oh, I don't have the right to talk about this yet. Like,
okay, yeah.
When I get to this point, then I'll promote it, right? And I think
some arbitrary point.
An arbitrary, like what point? And I think you can really get caught up in that cycle of like waiting for approval from others to do what you know you already know how to do. And I would say the next phase of that was when I started the podcast. That was when I got a lot more confident in my voice. And you can even hear from the very first podcast, which was around this time 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I sounded really nervous. You could tell it was my very first podcast. But then to like the last episode, I sound like I know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah. But it's like I could have had that confidence in the very beginning if I had just trusted myself and not felt like I had to wait to be 2 years down the line to, you know, own what I know and own my experience. I think that's the biggest thing with creating content. It's that like you're the subject matter expert on your life story and how you like nobody else can tell that story. And I think there's a lot of power when you realize that. And, you know, to fast forward to now, I even find myself like, you know, hesitating. Like I'll like write like a blog post, like I'll have like a great thought like every quarter. I don't do the I let go of the pressure of like you need to do it like once a week. I was like no, I don't have time for that. Like when I have something to say, I'll say it. But when I do, like sometimes I'll be like, oh, like I don't want to seem too self-promotional. Like, no, you have to advocate for yourself, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, and it helps people too. It's like even realizing that it's not really about you. It's about how your ideas can help other people. I feel like that really can get you out of your own head and just have fun with it, you know? Like that's well, I'm like talking to myself right now and I need to take my own advice.
There we
But
go.
like, you know, have fun with it.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be that serious.
So what was the process like of going from being particularly nervous to being confident in yourself? Because I have a very similar story. When I appeared on someone else's podcast for the first time, I was maybe 2-3 months into working in esports. So I didn't think that I knew anything. And this was maybe 3 years ago, around this time, 3 years ago. And then I watched, I was doing the timestamps for one that I recorded recently. And I was like, oh shit, this is the same person. Like this is actually insane. So like, what was the process for you there, and kind of what helped you get to the point you're at now?
Yeah, I do think I think one part of it is just kind of like doing the work.
Yes,
right?
putting in the reps. Yeah.
Putting in the reps, like there's that name that's been circulated like a million times. Like your first episode's not going to be great. Your first post isn't going to be great. But no one gets to like the 100th if you don't do the first one. And I think it's corny, but it's true. Like if I hadn't done the first one, I wouldn't have gotten better by the 10th. I wouldn't have gotten better by the 20th one. And I wouldn't have felt like I could just hop into an interview and like, you know, navigate the conversation and just, you know, be myself by like the 40th one. Right. Yeah. So I think it's really that evolution of like just doing the work and, you know, knowing that it's not going to come out of thin air. Like the confidence won't come out of thin air. It's going to come through trusting yourself and knowing that you put in the reps up front, very similar to basketball. So that when it's game time, you're ready to go. And, you know, his name is Ish. He wrote this book called Get Ish Done, which I still need to read. But he tweeted this thing one time where I think it was like highly successful people can, you know, look like they do things like out of thin air, right? Or just like it looks really easy for them. But what you don't see is like all the work that went into it, like leading up to it. It's because they've tested and learned, they've done things that weren't that great, and not calling myself a highly successful person, but like I just think that's really, really empowering to think about, that like in order to get to where you need to be comfortable doing the work and knowing that's not going to be perfect along the way. For sure. So yeah. And I think also just like not taking it too seriously too. Like I think we're all driven. Our generation is just very like goal oriented. Straight hustlers. Our generation is hustlers. Insane. We're always thinking about what's next. And I do feel like a few times in the process, I like lost the fun in it. You know what I mean? And I had to check myself. I relate to that heavily. Woo, I had to be like, girl, relax. It's not that deep. It's not that serious. Like, and like when it got too serious, that's when I wasn't having fun with it, right? Yes. Like I'd just be overthinking it. I'd be not looking forward to editing an interview, right? But it's like, okay, maybe I should take a step back and come back when I feel energized and not put unnecessary pressure on myself. And just have fun with it. I think that's been the biggest thing too, depending on like where you're coming from and creating content. Like for me, I wasn't trying to monetize it early on at all. That was not my goal. I was really just like, I just have a story to tell that I'm really passionate about. And then I realized that a lot of other athletes in my network and ones that I was able to meet through the process had a similar story to tell, and was just really excited about the opportunity to share those things. And so I think it's also like being honest with yourself, like, where are you coming from with this? Like, are you trying to monetize? Are you just doing it for fun? And keep that in mind as you're going through it. For sure. I mean, like I took myself really seriously around this time last year. And I was the editor of a business publication in esports, and I just found myself like really angry at everything, like, oh, everything's shit. And then right. I took a step back and I was like, okay, what am I doing for a living? I'm writing about people playing video games and getting paid millions of dollars for it.
what the fuck am I doing? Like, it's not that deep at all. Like, it's just a lot of the times that we get, I got more over invested in what I was doing and taking it way too seriously and thinking that it was life and death when in reality, like, it was all good. Like, I'm in a good position where I didn't have to write a lot anymore either. It was just like helping people to write good stories about people who play video games competitively, and like the supporting businesses around it. Like, this is an industry we're building as we're kind of going. Like, that's incredibly exciting. So like, why not just like look at the fun side of it? And then I found myself like I needed to kind of get out of the environment I was in to be able to kind of almost like shed my skin in a sense to be able to go ahead and do these things. So I'm probably 3 months into the new job, and as I say, I've like been trying new things now. An article I wrote today is something I never ever would have thought I'd have written before in my life, and part of me thinks, oh god, it was about how David Dobrik, so one of the biggest YouTubers, I believe, or like former Vine star or some shit. I've never seen him. Like, how he monetizes. So I was looking into every single aspect of, well, publicly at least, every single aspect of how he makes money and such. And it was just like, I don't care about this guy. I don't care about influence, blah blah blah. But it's what I was doing there is just literally documenting my learning. So I'm trying to learn about the whole influencer side more. I definitely don't want to be one, but I just think it's interesting what's happening right now, right? So I was like, I'm taking notes and I'm documenting things anyway. And my day job is to create content around stuff. So I could just make an article out of this, and it turned into a bit of a beast. And it got edited by a guy who's a big David Dobrik fan, and he was really happy with it. So I'm kind of like, not too bad. And I probably a month ago would have thought, oh, there's no way I could write that. There's no way I could ever do that because I don't know anything about the guy. But it's like we doubt ourselves way too much. And also something I just want to touch on quickly, something you said as well about, so we said about like putting in the reps and it's all the work that came before, which is gets you to that point, right? And I think that's important in like pricing. I've got a lot of freelancers that message me and say, look, like, how much should I charge? And I always tell them, like, whatever you're thinking of, double it, and probably actually add 50% on more after that as well, because we undervalue ourselves a lot. And this it's another cliche thing. I found like most of the cliche, like cheesy, corny things are actually, they're only that because they're so true. They've been repeated so often. But it's like, you're not getting paid for, like, say both you and I are up to get commissioned for an hour's podcast about a certain subject. You quote $1,000 for it, and I say $100, and then I go to you, why the hell have you charged that much? It's only an hour of work. It's everything that you've done before that, and everything you put in your own time that has led to that point. You're not paying for the hour, you're paying for the years of work into it and the concentrated effort there. I try to tell people, look, like, you may have started writing today, for example, and you're looking at how to rate yourself, but like, and how to price your rates. But what have you done before that? Oh, you director of blah 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 at a company. Okay, that's valuable. Okay, what did you learn there? And then, like, you break it down and they realize they know stuff, because once we learn something, I'll speak for myself. Once I learn something, no matter how complex it is, I then think everybody else knows it because it's so simple to me now. So I have no specialist knowledge, which of course is bullshit. I've spent 3 years doing what I'm doing. Like, I've had to have built something up, right? So I think the lesson I'm taking from all of this so far is like we grossly undervalue and underestimate ourselves, while also overestimating how important we are to other people.
That is so many gems. I'm like taking it to my head that I'm gonna go write down in my little notepad after this. I keep a pen on me, but that is so real. And the only other thing I wanted to re-emphasize was like choose your perspective as you're creating content or just work in general. Like, moving from like I have to I get to is so key. And I feel like when I chose to look at, I get to do this, I get to interview student athletes, I get to meet 40 new people that I didn't know before, I get to share this mess, like, you know what I mean? Like, just like look at the bigger picture, because I think so many of us get caught up in like the task that's right in front of us, and we don't see the end result, right? And I think that's just something that I try to carry from basketball too. It's like, if you think about just literally the process of going through a season, it's like let's say we had 25 games in a season. That's 25 nights. But we're practicing from the moment we get back on campus and we're playing until March.
Yeah.
That's how many months? That's 7 months of work end to end for 26 nights of being on the stage. And I think that just perspective, though, each day you're driven because it's like, I get to be here, like lucky to be here. I remember my coach, maybe it was my sophomore year. I just remember it being like a saying, like, we get to be here. Like, we get to put this jersey on. We get to wear Harvard on our chest. And I think that's just like perspective I try to carry with me, like just in life in general, because the day to day, it can get, days can get stressful. We're still in this damn lockdown. Like,
Yes.
things can be tiring, but just like keeping perspective, like I get to do this. I get to do this. I
So
think
like
that
reframing a chore as an opportunity in a sense.
period. That's it. Go tweet that after this.
There's a few tweets out of this, I think. Okay.
Go tweet that. I'll tweet it.
Yeah. No, that does make sense though. And I mean, like, it can even be boiled down to the silly stuff like having to like wash your dishes or something, right? It's like, oh, I have to do that, or it's like, oh, I have a place that I can live in and it is nice and warm, and I've just eaten some food where some people are starving out on the street right now. Like, it is a powerful like perspective switch, and it's insane how like just reframing something in your head in like the space of a couple of seconds, just catching yourself like being maybe ungrateful or something.
Yes.
No, that's not the case. No, this is the case. Like, I'm actually in a good position right now. I just think it's bad because whatever. I'm just thinking about it poorly. And then I'll wash those dishes happily. I'll be singing, I'll be dancing and stuff, of course. That's how I go. But I wanted to touch on your podcast a little bit. So where do you see it going then, considering how much you've learned throughout the episodes you've done so far, and you really coming into your own voice and your expertise and such?
Yeah. So it's been such a journey with the podcast, like from the very first. So the first episode was like me talking to myself, basically.
Okay.
And I remember I had already interviewed Chelsea Zadie. She played hockey at Harvard. And I was just gonna like start the podcast and like just like put it out there. I was like, yep, she'll tell the story. I was like, I don't need to introduce myself. I don't need to share why I'm here. And I got some, some hard loving advice from a close friend that was like, no, like put on your big girl pants and like tell your story. And I was like, okay. And like literally that episode was how your athletic journey informs your why. And it's crazy looking back, listening back to what I was saying and how literally like each step of it has been manifested through the journey of building Court to Corporate, but also literally looking at the podcast like in chapters. Because if I had to break it down, like you can low key hear where I'm at in my journey. Because I started it months after graduating, like 3 months after I had graduated. 3 months I had started my first job.
Right.
And you can hear where I'm at in my journey. Like in the first part, I'm trying to figure out what's my narrative now. What am I about now that I'm a student athlete in business? And, it's been framed as negative, but how can I reframe this for myself and feel empowered and not feel like this is the part where I've already reached my peak as a student athlete? It's more opportunity.
Yeah.
And then kind of getting to the next phase of interviews, it's kind of about, okay, how can I go act on this? How are people uncovering what they've learned from their sport and finding their unique way and point of view to apply it to drive growth in their career?
Right.
And then the third phase is kind of like, how are they growing in this aspect? I think we really define building your personal brand in different ways. I think for me, it was building Court to Corporate was never about the number. It was never about a metric. It was kind of about a journey of continually learning and growing. And that's something from basketball directly, like just enjoying that process of learning and investing in yourself, and how those repeated actions is what leads to you being a master of your craft. And I think the last part of it was like, a lot of the last episodes were around how do you bring the people around you? Because you can't do it alone. But how do you take a lot of the interpersonal skills that you've learned from sports to build a team around you in your career? I think networking is a really scary topic, especially for student athletes, where like a lot of us aren't able to do internships. And so we feel like relationships are the bridge that will get us to the promised land. So it's like there's heightened pressure there, right? But it's like stepping away from the fact that relationships don't have to be transactional. They don't have to be a means to an end. It's very similar to the process of wanting to constantly learn from people and study the film and apply it to your game like you did in your sport. Do that same thing now. And like literally those 4 key lessons, I didn't see that though while I was, trying to go, just push out episodes for the sake of it. I had to take a step back and pause and like actually reflect, similar to how I reflected when I first started. I had to reflect after I'd gotten to a certain point and being like, what have I learned from this? And it was really that there's, 4 principles that have been core to help me get to where I am now, but I believe are stories of others. That was not just my insight, right? Like I interviewed 40 people along the way that really helps me craft what that message is. Yeah. And so, now looking ahead, it's like, how do you package that up and share that with people more broadly? And, Court to Corporate will always be a part of the story. Who knows? Maybe I'll bring the podcast back. I'm not really pressing it right now because I've been, working on kind of this evolution of it called New Games, Same Mentality, which is really what I just described, right? It's like listening to a podcast is nonlinear. Someone can listen to it and take away so many different lessons, but these are the core principles. These are the foundations of what it means to leverage what you know from your game to drive growth in your career. So that's kind of where things are now. And it's been a journey similar to the podcast. It has been a journey of building that. Things will always take longer than you think they will. But similar to growing the podcast, similar to just anything, like I think I'm just, trying to enjoy this process of all the different versions it's been through, of all the times I've gotten to like a final and then I've been like, no, like rip it apart, like start all over again, right? Like it's just been a constant journey of evolving it, but it's in a really exciting place right now. So I'm excited to kind of share that soon.
That's awesome. I look forward to it. And I will share it myself. Not that, well, hopefully I've got some like crossover followers who would be interested, hopefully. I'm sure they have, because I think there are lessons to be learned in areas where you think they're not applicable at all. So I'm reading books on topics that are not related to my industry at all, but I'm finding things that can be utilized by myself in what I do. And I think that's a big thing as well. I think a lot of people, it's a bit relevant to that, where you can take great ideas from other industries and you can utilize them in your industry. If they're not already being used, that's even better. But like, I don't think any real idea is too unique anymore. I think everything's almost been thought of. There's not too many inventive people right now. It's because there's just so much noise. There's so much going on, right? So for me, it's just finding what works for myself in as many different areas as I can. Because before, I would just only look at my one industry and think, okay, I can only operate within what's here. But then how do you bring anything new if you're only ever looking inward in that sense? So I find myself doing that a lot recently. Like I'm reading books on like the Roman Empire and stuff like that, like, which sounds ridiculous. Like I'm never going to get anything from that, but strangely you can find kind of inspiration and little nuggets in like the weirdest of places. So that's my way of saying, please check out everything that Kirby does, even if you're only an esports fan and you're not into student athletes and stuff. Like, please check it out, because I guarantee you'll find something. I think the amount of gems dropped here so far proves that. Well, what I would like to ask is like kind of your ethos or your kind of thinking on what makes an effective personal brand. I know it's subjective pretty much to the person, but like, do you think there are any like core principles or activities or kind of genetic makeup of what makes a good personal brand?
It's funny you asked that, because the point I was going to build on what you just said is that there's no such thing as a new idea, right? Like athletes in business been done. That's been done in many shapes or forms. It's everywhere today, right? And I think the biggest thing is that, going back to what I said earlier, like you are the subject matter expert on your story. And so I think any good personal brand isn't about the things around you. I think it's about your unique perspective and how you bring what you're learning and mix things together to share it through your unique lens.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the biggest thing, because I think so many people, depending on the goal, I mean, like building a personal brand, some people start with, I want to create content. Okay, about what? Versus starting from an inward point of view and like really looking deep and reflecting and understanding like how have all of your experiences and your journey built on top of each other, how have they, you know, informed your unique value proposition. How do you take that and leverage that instead of looking outwards for things? Because I think that's where you know, I think that's where a strong personal brand starts. It has to start within versus looking externally to find the thing that you want to latch on or to be known for.
Right.
And it's not that like your personal brand is about you promoting yourself, right? Like so many examples from the Court to Corporate podcast is like people found from looking back at their athletic journey that they were passionate about networking and teaching people about networking. People found from their athletic journey that they were passionate about a career in law, right? Because they realized as a teammate, they really thrived when they were in service of others. And that's what they loved about their sport. And so they wanted to find that in their career. So it's like, open your mind to what you can learn from your own story and how that can inform your unique value and what you do in your career. Because I really think there's no such thing as a new idea. It's just all about your unique perspective and how you bring those things together to tell a new story.
I like it. It's just remixing things to your own personal kind of flavor as such, right? And I mean, yeah, I'm in the process of trying to work that out, and I don't know myself like how best to go about it, but instead of necessarily waiting until I have like the perfect angle or the perfect way of going about it, I just ended up recording a chat with somebody who I thought it would be interesting to have a chat with, and then I ended up just like, oh, I need a personal website. Okay, like what do I do? Okay, and then I think I'll probably just like repackage, retool those things when I like land upon something. But I think it'll probably be more of a like a almost like a I don't want to say journey. I really don't, like iteration over and over until I get to a point where it's just naturally that's how it is, just by the fact of just doing, because I write a lot. I'm recording these. I don't have actually a set time I release them, and I should sort that out. But I just like doing them when I do them and just putting them out. Like I can formalize all those things later. Like I'm recording in Zoom. I don't have OBS and all the fancy overlays and like intro music. I don't even have an intro scripted. I don't have any of that stuff. And I look at like Bilal, who's behind Creator Lab, like the amount of work he puts into a single episode is insane. And then the amount I do is very little, but I also think like there's a reason he is where he is, and like he's prolific in what he's doing now. Like the guests he's securing each time has done great. And I mean, I'm actually surprised like the caliber of guest, in my own opinion at least, that I've been able to secure. And I think if I wouldn't have thought that it was possible if I didn't just reach out and ask them. So of course that is networking, right? And my biggest tip for networking for sure is just like there's no downside and only like upside by asking someone or reaching out, right? If I DM you and say, hey, would you like to come to the podcast, and you don't even reply, it's like, okay, what have I lost there? Nothing. Maybe like 0.1% of dignity if I really rate myself highly, and like, but apart from that, like that's about it. And what do you stand to gain? It's like literally anything and everything by reaching out, right? So I think the fear of getting started is a big thing, especially. So I just got started straight away. It wasn't a show, it was just or a podcast. It was just one conversation, and then I wanted to have another conversation with someone. So I was like, okay, I can package them together, and then I can run with that a bit, come up with a color that's going to be unique for all the thumbnails and stuff. Like that's it, just like the little bits and bobs. And it's like the theme of it is, I know I want to speak to people who are doing interesting things to do with creators and athletes and such, right? So mainly like the creator and brand side. And I was like, that's kind of the core of, as to everything I'm looking at right now. So it makes sense to continue with that theme and package it that way. I
Yeah.
think overthinking is an amazing thing. Like that's a thing that's definitely happens, and a lot of the good things that have happened in my life have come from like just doing and then thinking really intensely later on, and
Yes.
working things out later. Because I don't know who says it, but it's another good quote where it's like, you can only connect the dots like when you look backwards. Like in hindsight, like everything makes sense once you've already got to the point, and you can look back and then see how you got there. But like in the middle of it, while you're in the process of doing things, it can just seem a bit of a mess, and you can't really see what you're doing, right? So I don't know, I've just blurted a lot there, but
No.
I want to say like, what something you've done, which I think is interesting, is in my opinion at least, it seems like you're crafting like a personal brand out of helping other people create like a personal brand and like creating stuff for themselves outside of what they're doing right now. And I think that's a very meta and clever game. It's like if your direct mission is to like help other people, it doesn't mean that you can't still like help yourself in that process.
That is spot on. And one thing I wanted to say from what you were just saying was like just the importance of like iterating, because I remember like a year ago, I was so hung up. I was like, I need a personal website. I was like, if I don't have a personal website, like personal brand is going to fall to crap. I was like, I was making this big deal of it. I had the Court to Corporate website. I had the Court to Corporate podcast. And I just remember just overthinking it. Like, what am I going to write here? What am I going to write here? What do I need to have on it? How many pages do I need to have? And it fell on the back burner, right? Then, as it does, it fell on the back burner. And it wasn't until, what year? It's 2021. Sorry, 2020 was so long.
2021, yeah. Somehow.
Hold on. What year is it? It wasn't until January 2021 that I was locked out of my Instagram, right? I'm a big Instagram girl.
Right.
I was locked out of my Instagram, and I was like, I need to within seconds, I went to card.com and I pulled together a personal website that within like 30 minutes, that was probably better than anything I would have done, like planning it for a month. Right. And it was crazy because a year ago, I didn't have all the pieces of the story together. Right. Like I was still just working on Court to Corporate, and I didn't have this new evolution of where it's going. And some things have happened in between here and there, all good. But it was really clear at this point what my story was and how it all flowed together, because, well, I didn't do it intentionally, but I was iterating over the past of the course year, and not, trying to force feed things that weren't ready to be out in the world. So it's just like, be where your feet are and, create what you're creating in that moment, and then know that it will all build on each other. And eventually you'll get to the point where you can package it up and it'll be great. But don't let that, like wanting it to be pretty and perfect and just having the I's dotted and the T's crossed stop you from starting in the first place. Because I wouldn't have had the story if I didn't just keep going. And what was your question? Sorry, I completely forgot.
No, there wasn't necessarily a question as such. I just kind of blurted out 75 different things at once. I had like, I just had like a Kanye West like stream of consciousness about everything for like 3 minutes. So there's nothing in particular. But the thing I kind of ended on though was how you're creating a personal brand off of the back of helping other people.
Right. Yeah,
it is kind of where it ended, and like that is a clever thing. Like you don't have to be. Even if you weren't doing your podcast and stuff, you could still create something of your own that's in your particular tone and for you. Even if you're like kind of operating in the shadows and such, like obviously it helps if you are putting out your own content, which you are. But like your mission is helping other people, and I recently kind of nailed down what I'm aiming to do, and mine's the exact same thing. But it doesn't mean that you can't like help yourself and set yourself up better, because if you help yourself grow, you can help more people and impact that way. So it's actually selfless to be selfish in that sense.
Yes, that is so real. And that's exactly what it is, right? Like Court to Corporate, going back to what I was talking about with the podcast evolution, I was learning along the way too. Like, yeah, I was sharing the episode and people were listening to it, but as I was interviewing Alan Stein Jr. or John Rice, the founder of MLT, like I was learning from them too. And you just kind of hear it in the evolution of the episodes and the questions I'm asking. Those are the questions I had for myself, right? So I think it really is like, you never know how many people are going through exactly what you're going through. And how if you step up to the plate and say, hey, I'll help us do this, I got us, that can go such a long way. Because I think where so many people get caught up is that they don't want to feel self-promotional. They don't want to toot their own horn, but it's like you're helping people by sharing your story. So like see that part of it just as much as like, yeah, it'll help you. You'll get a few likes here and there. Cool. But one person is going to reach out to you after the episode and say, wow, that was so inspirational. Thank you so much for sharing that conversation. Like, I just reached out to the person that you interviewed. We're setting up a call. Like, those are the things that matter. And I think it really is kind of coming at it from that point of view of like, it's not about me, goes a really long way. And then even now, like to where things are now, it's crazy because when I took that like break from court to corporate, I started reading a lot of personal development books because it was like right in the beginning of the pandemic too. Like the pandemic shook everybody. It shook me. I just had like a whole like mini like another life crisis. I was like, oh my gosh. I was like whoa, like let me just chill out and just like rethink how I'm approaching some things and stop working on things and like work on myself again.
Okay.
Right. So that was the first thing. And I went down this whole journey of listening to so many and reading so many personal development books. And it's crazy because I've taken so many of those learnings from like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Great at Work, The Startup of You, The Brand Within by Damon John, like just taking so many of those things. And it's like, this is also like this growth that I just went through. That's also what I need to share with people, because it's not just about like this upfront of like getting going. It's also about how we also need to continue to work on ourselves. And I think that's just like the power in sharing your story. Like I went through that, and it's not just for me to keep to myself. I'm going to share that with other people because I know it will help someone, and I know it'll help them through their journey. Like you never know where people are at. So I really do think it's like, that's the best position to be in, where you're just constantly creating out of your unique point of view and like, building up yourself and innovating on yourself and taking yourself to the next level and then sharing that with people. Like that's the exciting position to be into. And I think that's the magic. That's what I'm trying to share with New Game Same Mentality. It's that like your career is another opportunity to grow yourself like you did in your game. Like see that, because that's exciting. Like when you start your career and it's like, I have another opportunity to decide what I want to be known for in this court. I will always say court because I played basketball. I know there's other fields of play, but I get to decide what I want to be known for on this court. I get to decide my game plan to go invest in it and invest in myself. I get to decide the move. I get to decide how I act in it and put in the universe, the people I bring around me. Like it's literally the same thing. And I think just seeing that opportunity when you start your career, in addition to where you're working and, the day-to-day, like how will you develop yourself? That's what I want to share with people. And that's the journey that I've been on. So you're so right. It's literally like taking audit of what you're going through and knowing that it can help other people.
That's awesome. And I think something you said, like not being afraid to like toot your own horn and stuff, right? And like be proud of your successes. I think I speak for myself. I tend to be happier for other people than I am for myself when something great happens, right? And if you are quiet about your successes, then you almost like minimize it for yourself. If you don't celebrate it adequately as you do help other people, if your significant other gets like a promotion or something and it's something to be going for ages, you would celebrate the shit out of that. And like,
Yes.
and if something of equivalent importance to you happens to yourself, it's just like, okay, now I need to get my head down and really start grinding. Everything starts here. It's like, at what
Right.
point do we stop and just go, oh shit, I've done something great here. Okay, what can I learn from that, perhaps, and help other people get to that position as well. And what can I take forward from this and apply in whatever I'm doing now to keep going and keep the successes coming. I think, yeah, as almost minimizing your successes. And I mean, that's not healthy, because then I guarantee you don't minimize the bad points and maybe the mistakes you're making,
Yeah.
the flaws and stuff. You probably
Bigger.
amplify those. Exactly. And it's a fucked up way of thinking about things. And that's just an overall life thing, I think.
Mhm.
And I'd not realized that too much until you said that. And I was like, oh shit,
Mhm.
I need to be more boastful, because I mean, it's we tag like a negative connotation towards that stuff.
Yes.
And it doesn't make sense to, I don't think.
It
As long as you're not
doesn't.
like obnoxious and only talking about how great you are, like at that point it's different, you know. But like if it's just like, oh wow, I've got a new job and I'm getting paid more and I've got more responsibility and it's something I've been going for 3 years, blah blah blah. Like that's great. Like you don't have to
Yes,
just go, oh yeah, it is what it is. Still got to work
exactly.
though. It's like, no, I get the opportunity to do this new thing now. Like that's great, you know.
Yes,
So there's
that
probably
is
some power there.
no, and I'm saying these things, but I'm not good at it. Like I need to be so much better at that. And I like literally going back to where we started this conversation, it's like so many of us think that other people are constantly thinking about us because we're
Mm-hmm.
the main character in our lives and we're the main character. Like we're seeing it through our point of view. But think about how much you go through on your day, right? Think about how busy you are. If someone tweets something one time and then you happen to see it again 4 months later and it's the same thing and they're promoting the same thing, well, do you think anything of that?
No,
I'm like,
you
no,
don't
I don't.
realize.
I'm like, good for you. Good for you. Like, and I always see people that, promote themselves and promote their work and promote the great things that they're doing. And I'm like, I love, like, good for you. You should be proud of yourself. And like, I am trying to, get out of my own way and do
Mm-hmm.
that for myself too.
But what I found is, there are people like myself, I guess, who tweet out, whether you want to call them like maxims or like little lessons or like just thoughts they've had throughout the day. They're typically the people that need it most, and it's kind of antithetical to Twitter because you're kind of signaling out what you want to put out into the world.
Yep.
So a lot of people think that, say, if I tweet about productivity, people think, oh, this guy must think he's the most productive guy and he's got it all figured out. It's like, no, not at all. I'm trying to like distill my thought and understand it. And it's a good reminder to myself. Like I'm using Twitter in like almost a selfish way, but like
Yes,
documenting my shit, and then everyone else can just follow along for that. It doesn't mean that if I tweet about exercise, it doesn't mean that I think I'm the most in shape and I have the perfect form when I'm doing deadlifts or something like that. It doesn't make any sense.
right.
It's quite the opposite. It's like there's a reason we're thinking about that, and there's a reason we thought, okay, yeah, that needs to be shared, because it's like, oh, that's an
Right.
occurrence or a thought I've just had. I think it's important
Yep.
because obviously I need that, or I have needed it in the past. So there's a kind of effed up thing there where all my mates think like I'm the most motivated, most inspired, most active, and it's like, no, it's none of that at all. Like I'm I'm
Right. I'm
I'm on at
working through it.
5:30 thinking I'm going to get up and go for a run, and then next thing I know, I'm waking up at 8 o'clock. Like, oh, I need to go sit at my desk and get some work done. It's like I
Right.
didn't go out for that run. I'm not perfect in that sense. Also,
Right.
no. So no, I don't think there's any like sense of irony or anything in like knowing what's best but not abiding by it, because like it's hard
Yeah.
to just switch on and say, okay, I know this is the perfect thing. I'm going to do it all the time,
Yep.
because like we do things wrong despite knowing what's best all the time. There are people who smoke cigarettes. Like we all unanimously know there is nothing good that comes from those, but people do it.
Right.
We know we slack on work and we don't get the dissertation done and we leave it to the last minute and stuff like that, you know. Like so even though we know what's best, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're carrying that out. And
Right.
it's good to remind yourself. So no, I don't think there's any irony in it. And it's good that you're aware of it though, with you saying like, oh, I need to do X more, I need to do Y more. The fact that you've got the self-awareness and kind of the humility to go, oh yeah, I'm not perfect at that. Oh, I need to work a lot on
Mhm.
that. Even though you may be advising other people to do it, like that takes some that takes
Exactly.
some honesty with yourself though, to be fair. Like I'm not saying that as like any sort of criticism or anything. I do the same thing, you know.
No.
I think that's a commendable thing, as opposed to like, oh, you should really work on that.
Right. Exactly. And I think it's just like the last thing I'll say on that is that I think there's like different ways to build your brand. And I think that's something people need to embrace more. Like, if you see someone building their brand through posting on Instagram every day, don't let that cause you anxiety because you're not posting on Instagram every day. Maybe that's not the best way for you to build your brand.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the way you build your brand is through your results. Maybe it's through how you communicate your story one-on-one through your diligent networking. Or maybe it's not that. Maybe it's you do a blog post once every quarter, right? Like, I think there's so much how-tos on how to build your brand, and this is the equation, and this is the frequency, and if you don't do this, you're not going to build your brand. I don't say any of that in New Game Same Mentality, because I leave it to the standpoint of like, it's about growing yourself in the way you best see fit, but starting from a point of intention and strategy, and trusting that if you move with that, like, it will flow in place if you do the work, and not getting too caught up in the medium. Like, because for me, it's like, and being in marketing, it's like, you're always on. Like, you're always thinking, I mean, any job, right? You could say about any job, but like, for me with marketing, it's like, you're always on, you're always thinking about ideas on social media, like all the time, like making sure you stay informed, reading the news to stay informed, figuring, like, you're creating content all the time.
Yeah.
And maybe sometimes I don't want to create content for myself. Not this week. I don't, because I just finished creating content for 20 other things. Yeah. And it's just like, be okay with that. It's like, you know time and season, and know that everything can't be everything at once. Like, allow yourself to be in whatever phase you're in. Trust however you're building your brand in that moment, and it'll work the way you want it to. I just think, like, there's so much, like, I don't trust the formulas on how to build your brand, because I'm just like, if that works for you, that's great. But that might not be the medium through which other people want to do theirs. And they shouldn't feel pressure or feel bad or feel lesser because they don't want to do that. So I think that's just like, that's something I always talk about when it comes to like building a personal brand. It's just like, trust your process.
For sure. And as you said, like, taking time off, like, if you've like built brand equity with like the people who follow you and such, like, that's not just gonna disappear overnight. Like, yeah, like if you think like, oh, I haven't posted in 2 weeks, people won't know what I stand for anymore. It's like, no, that's not true.
No,
Like, I don't have a television, so I don't see any adverts, right? But like, say there was like a Pepsi advert I see, or like I think of Pepsi, I know exactly what's what when it comes to them. Like, they've built up enough brand equity. They know who they are. They know what they're doing. It's just like, obviously that's an extreme example, of course, and then it's not a personal brand. But like, I know what they stand for. Like, I know what Rich Roll stands for. I know who Casey Neistat is and what he's doing. Like, all these people. Like, so I think, like, I just took 2 weeks off from doing this, only 4 episodes in, and I'm like, oh shit, like, I already seem lazy. And it's like, no. Like, no one said anything. no one messaged me like, why have you given that? Well, a couple of people said, have you quit already? I was just like, nah, no.
Okay, literally, I have not published an episode for Court to Corporate in 9 months.
Oh, wow.
And it was so hard for me because I was like, oh my God. I was like, people are going to think that I quit. People are going to be like, where are the episodes? Nobody has asked me where the episodes are. And people still ask me about Court to Corporate. Like, that's where we started this conversation. I still get asked about it in interviews. People still ask if they can be on the show. Unfortunately, right now, no, because I'm just like, there's a lot going on and I'm not like recording right now, but it's like, it's okay. Like, it's still a part of your story. And just because you don't do it for 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, you can pick it back up when it makes sense for you, but don't feel the pressure to always be on.
For sure. And one thing I just want to say before wrapping up, like, I saw a couple people recently saying like, personal, like, we're being oversaturated with personal brands and everyone's like gone into like business mode and such, right? And I don't really think there's such things like oversaturation when it comes to personal branding, especially on like Twitter or something. But also, even if we were getting oversaturated and you want to stand out, the best way for you to fight against the oversaturation is to start a personal brand and lean into it still, because that's the only, like, you still need to, if you want to cut through that and do what you're doing, you still need to figure out who you are and what you offer and how you're going to like portray it and convey it to cut through all of what you perceive to be bullshit. So like,
Yep.
ironically, the more oversaturated the personal brand market becomes, if that's a thing, like the more important it is to have a personal brand. So
Exactly.
I think it's almost paradoxical and it doesn't really make too much sense.
It doesn't. In my head, I was like, "What does that even mean?"
I don't know.
Like,
But I saw
what
it and I
what
unfollowed
does
them
that
and I can't
even
remember who it
mean?
was. But
Like,
it was some
people
Twitter
are.
sage.
Yeah, I'm like, let people create. Like, if someone wants to have a podcast, let them have a podcast. It doesn't like everybody has a podcast. Okay, and let there be more.
So
You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like, there shouldn't really be boundaries or limits, or
No.
like, oh, it's too late to make a personal brand because
No, it's just
everybody
like,
has one.
there's more podcast options for people to listen to now. That's great.
Right.
Like
And
user generated content and such is fucking cool. So
exactly.
I don't see a problem with that stuff at all. But
We're on the
of
same
course,
page.
there are contrarians everywhere, of course, right?
Right,
And
right.
people need to stand. Some people's personal branding is just opposing everything that we think of norm and everything that is nice,
Right.
and trying to spin it on its head and tell you why it's bad. But I don't know, in respect of time, because you've gracefully given me about an hour right now. I just want to say thank you very much for listening to my rambles and for your honesty.
Yes,
I
no,
really
thank
appreciate
you.
it. And how can people find you as you continue to build what you're building?
Yeah, so I'm Kirbo Bangs, KirboBangss on Twitter and Instagram. And then hold on. I was like, I'm not Kirbo Bangs on LinkedIn. And then I'm Kirby Porter on LinkedIn. So those are my socials. Connect with me there. And then on both of those, you'll see links to my newsletter and stuff like that. So definitely stay tuned as I share some more stuff in the coming months. I'm excited.
Awesome stuff. I just like it's been great getting out of my bubble and seeing your tweets, because as I say, I can kind of attribute some of what you're saying and the lessons you're tweeting into what I'm doing. So that's great. So I definitely recommend following. And this is the part where I should ask people to like, subscribe, click a notification bell or something. But I'm not going to do that, even though I've inadvertently just done it. So with that being said, I'm going to end it here. And thank you again for taking the time. I would love to have you on again way in the future, like a year's time or something like that, and see where we've got to, where hopefully we're out of lockdown and able to live normal-ish lives again, you know?
Exactly.
Thank you very
Likewise.
much.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.